Have you ever felt like you're just going through the motions? As if every day is a copy-paste version of the last, moving forward without meaning or purpose? Maybe everything that once made sense suddenly lost its significance. The things that used to bring certainty now feel hollow. And then, out of nowhere, comes that uncomfortable feeling, one that's impossible to ignore. A quiet but relentless whisper inside you asking, "Why am I here? What is my purpose?" You're not alone in that feeling. Some of history's greatest minds have wrestled with the same haunting questions, including one of the most celebrated writers of all time, Leo Tolstoy. Author of War and Peace and Anna Karenina, Tolstoy was the literary giant of his era, a man whose influence shaped generations. He had everything: fame, fortune, a loving wife, and a beautiful family. Yet despite it all, something shifted when he reached 50. What happens when a man who seemingly has it all starts questioning whether life has any meaning at all? Tolstoy's midlife crisis was no ordinary crisis. It was a complete unraveling of everything he once believed. His thoughts became consumed by a deep, almost unbearable nihilism. The happiness he had known vanished, replaced by an overwhelming emptiness. It got so bad that he even found himself contemplating suicide. But instead of succumbing to despair, he embarked on a spiritual journey, one that would change not only his own life, but the lives of countless others who would come after him. But why did this happen? And how did he pull himself out of the abyss? Tolstoy's struggle with faith and meaning began long before his crisis. As a young man, he was skeptical of Christianity. The early loss of his parents left him with a deep sense of abandonment and disillusionment, and the religious teachings he encountered felt hollow. To him, religion was something imposed, something accepted out of fear rather than truth. He would later say that faith, when propped up only by external pressures, crumbles the moment real knowledge and experience challenge it. His early years were marked by turbulence. He fought in the brutal Crimean War, an experience that solidified his disdain for violence and authority. When he returned, he threw himself into literature, pouring his soul into stories that would define him as one of the greatest writers in history. He married Sofia Tolstaya in 1862, had 13 children, and lived in his grand estate at Yasnaya Polyana, surrounded by intellectuals and artists who admired his genius. On the surface, it seemed like the perfect life, but inside, something was eating away at him. By the time he turned 50, the questions he had once buried began resurfacing with unbearable force. The weight of his own thoughts became so heavy that he could barely sleep. His mind became trapped in an obsessive loop of existential dread. In his essay, A Confession, he described the torment of this period, admitting that he had to actively convince himself not to take his own life. What is the meaning of life? He asked himself over and over, if in the end we all die. What happens after death? What is the value of wealth, fame, or achievement if everything is temporary? These weren't just passing thoughts. They consumed him day and night. But how does someone come back from the edge of despair? How did Tolstoy find his way out of the darkness? He captured his hopelessness in a single haunting sentence. If not today, it will be tomorrow. If not tomorrow, it will be in 30 years. What difference does it make? This thought perfectly encapsulated the depth of his despair. But instead of surrendering to it, he made a different choice. He set out on a journey to search for meaning. Tolstoy turned to science, philosophy, and ideology, hoping for answers. One of the most powerful moments in his search came when he reflected on a parable he later included in A Confession. The story tells of a man fleeing from a wild beast, only to fall into an abandoned well. Below him, a dragon waited with its mouth open, ready to devour him. In desperation, the man clung to a branch growing from the well's wall, trying to prevent his fall. As he dangled between two inevitable horrors, life suffering above and death below, he noticed tiny drops of honey dripping from the branch's leaves. He reached out and tasted the honey, momentarily forgetting the terror that surrounded him. For Tolstoy, this parable mirrored his own life. He realized he was caught between two extremes: the fear of existence, the beast, and the inevitability of death, the dragon. The fleeting pleasures of life were like the honey, temporary distractions, but no real answers. He refused to surrender to despair and instead immersed himself in the study of different philosophies, hoping to fill the void within him. Yet, none of these theories provided the answers he sought. He encountered philosophies that preached total resignation, suggesting that the best fate was never to have been born, or that since death is better than life, we should rid ourselves of existence as soon as possible. Science, too, offered little solace. The Darwinist perspective, for instance, painted a picture of life as a meaningless accident, a mere collection of energy destined to decay and disappear. Science could explain the mechanisms of life, but it could not answer the fundamental question: why live? Disillusioned with philosophy and science, Tolstoy turned his gaze elsewhere. He began to observe the people around him. After much reflection, he identified 4 ways in which people coped with the absurdity of existence. As he searched for answers, Tolstoy saw that even if reason dismissed faith as a leap without concrete proof, it remained the only way to transcend the limitations of the finite world. Human suffering was fleeting, but faith in God offered a purpose beyond ephemeral existence. Faith was no longer just an intellectual concept. It became a way to endure life's challenges and find meaning amid suffering. Although his reason resisted, Tolstoy ultimately accepted that this was the only response capable of bringing him peace and purpose. From that moment on, his life underwent a profound transformation. He realized that the meaning of life was not found in glory, wealth, or individual achievements, but in compassion, humility, and service to others. Inspired by this discovery, Tolstoy embraced a simpler lifestyle, mirroring that of the peasants, and renounced many aristocratic luxuries. However, he found no solace in the Russian Orthodox Church, which he deemed corrupt and distant from Christ's true teachings. Instead, he studied scripture independently and found moral guidance in the Sermon on the Mount, which helped reshape his worldview. This transformation also echoed in his writings, particularly in A Confession, where he narrated his existential crisis and the path to inner peace. His new philosophy, however, created tensions within his family. His wife, Sophia, strongly opposed his desire to renounce his wealth and copyright royalties. Their disagreements grew, causing Tolstoy great emotional distress. In 1910, at age 82, Tolstoy fled his home in search of an even simpler life. Traveling in secret, he left Yasnaya Polyana on a cold October night, accompanied only by his doctor and daughter Alexandra. However, his health was failing, and he fell ill during the journey. He passed away days later, on November 20th, 1910, at the small railway station of Ostapovo. Despite his struggles, Tolstoy's final moments were marked by serenity. His legacy extends beyond literature. He left behind a profound philosophical and spiritual impact, inspiring countless people to seek simplicity, purpose, and meaning in their own lives.